Hey gang, I am in Duluth, Minnesota, and I am at the famous Glensheen Mansion. So we are going to look at a few things here. Now, this is the Condon family mansion from I think it was the early 1900s, and it was Chester and Clara Condon who lived here. And basically I'll tell you all about their life and what happened here, how they built this beautiful place for their family. But there was a murder that happened here of one of the descendants, one of the children. It's a bizarre case, and it is said this place is also haunted. So we're going to go upstairs, and I'm going to kind of focus on the areas where it was Elisabeth Congdon who was murdered in her bed, and the nurse that was watching over her was murdered on the stairs. In fact, the stairs are right up this way. So we're going to walk up those stairs and I'll show you where it happened. But before we do go upstairs, let's take a look at some of the shared family areas on the lower level and the first floor. The breakfast room. Have you ever seen a milk room? Well, if you haven't, you have now. And this is where you would wash the clothes, wash and dry the clothes. And here is where they would iron the clothes. On the old American ironing machine company, iron. Now that is a fancy device here. As they would roll the clothes through there. I guess that would do the job, but not before you would dry the clothes in the old Maytag. Look at this. Kind of like the clothesline concept on bars. And then these would slide in to that cavity or that box, which in there would have, I'm sure, heated to 200 degrees of dry heat. And they would all be controlled in this room here. Oh, look at this. Yeah, these are the gas pilot lights or gas lights. Look at that. Breakthrough technology of 1905. And in there that's where the clothes would be. Very interesting. Imagine the parties they had here. Just imagine. It's a children's area here. Little chairs, little table. And we have some pictures of those little children. Just for strolls or disabled? Not sure. You know, these lights at the originally were gas lights. Old toboggan. How many times did they go down the hills? All those memories. So now let's go up these infamous stairs to the second floor. And as we come up, we reach the landing, this landing that has some beautiful memories, a picture of Marjorie, one of the daughters. But there would be another Marjorie that would frequent these halls, and something very, very bad would happen right here. Let's move upstairs. So this is the master bedroom. And here is the bathroom. It's really interesting in here. Look at this thing. Never seen anything like it. It's called a SITZ, S-I-T-Z bath for soaking below the waist. If they could only imagine the tubs that we have these days, right? Look at this hardware. Look at these fixtures, holy cow. So this is the early version of the Kohler multi-shower. Oh yes, the dump shower. And then when you're finished and all cleaned up, you come in here to get dressed. Right? Look at that. Look at the collar and the suit, suspenders, and of course the top hat. The top hat, the sinister top hat we love. Yes. And of course, if you want to wear the bowler hat, there it is. So this is where it happened. This is the room where she was killed. She was smothered with a satin pillow in this bed right here. My, oh my. Look at that doll. And look at that amazing picture. Some amazing artifacts from this room. Famous murder case. All right, we are going to go to the cemetery and we're going to pay respects. I will tell you this story. Okay, gang, we're at the cemetery now on this brisk, crisp day in Duluth, Minnesota. We're at Forest Hill Cemetery. Man, I'd like to be back in that mansion. It was nice and toasty warm in there. But we're going to take our walk, and I'm going to tell you about Elisabeth, her background, and what happened. You know, she was killed in that bed. And it's a very creepy story. But before we do that, as I walk, I'm going to give you a little background on the Condon family, and we'll talk about Chester and Clara. Give you a little background on how that all came to be. So let's take the walk and let's talk a little more history here in Duluth, Minnesota. So Chester grew up, actually born and grew up in New York, and he would attend Syracuse University. And he would actually be in the first graduating class. Now that is when Syracuse was, well, Syracuse was practically a one building college. I mean, there were some more buildings, but it was like nothing like today, as you could imagine. Now, he was kind of into the law background, but this is where he met Clara. Clara was from San Francisco. Now, both of their parents were preachers. Of course, Clara's dad was into the gold rush. They ended up out there. So she ended up going to Syracuse, and they would graduate together, fall in love. She would get into the arts, and he would get into, you know, with his law. I think he passed the bar in New York, but he would come out here pioneering to Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, where he would become the principal of the school there. And that's how he would get his start. Now, he was not making enough money to wed Clara Bannister. And they would write letters, and he would save his pennies. But he did not make much, and it was kind of going nowhere. So he ended up relocating to St. Paul and working in law. Now, this is where his fortunes would start to change, because he met a guy named William Bilson. Now, William was the U.S. attorney here for the state of Minnesota, and they would hit it off, and Bilson liked his work. He said, "I like you, why don't you join my practice? And I'll pay you this and this." Now, this was enough money to propose, and that is when Chester wrote to Clara and said, "Pick a wedding date, let's go." So they got married, and they came to St. Paul, and they had 5 kids, raising a family, and, you know, getting by, but not getting rich. But his fortunes really changed when this other guy came to town, and his name was Henry Oliver. Now, Henry Oliver is basically the big steel magnate, right under, second only to Carnegie. And he came out here because this is iron country. They call it the Iron Range. And this would be where Oliver was to do a lot of speculation, survey, and buy out companies. This was the future. Now, if you know this area at all, a lot of iron and a lot of copper. So it was kind of like the gold of the West. This was like booming with mines. And the coolest part of the story is that Henry Oliver came to the office. He had heard this Bilson guy is the best brains in town with law. I've got to have him represent me. So what happens? He goes into the office, and Bilson's gone. He's like on a trip. And he's not coming back until after Henry is leaving town. So, well, you talk to the second guy in charge, right? So he says, well, let's chat to Chester. Chester and him sit down. And it said they're both Republicans, and they really both hit it off. I should say they're both of the same, it doesn't matter which party. But anyway, they both hit it off, and starts representing them, and you get clued into a lot of great information. Speculation. So needless to say, Chester is making a lot of money. And the short story on that is Chester and Clara became very wealthy, and they built that unbelievable mansion because they moved up here to Duluth to get rich. Well, it happened. One of those children, of the several they had more children, was Elisabeth Congdon. Chester had died in 1916 and Clara many years later in 1950. But that is when, I believe, Elisabeth was the only child left, but she inherited the Glensheen Estate. And she was a single woman, so she adopted a couple of daughters. Jacqueline Barnes, she renamed her, one of them, Marjorie. And she had a second daughter, Jennifer Susan, 1935. Now, Marjorie was the black sheep of the family. She started out as a tough nut. She was growing up boisterous, troublemaker, getting in trouble, and she would not change. She would actually get worse as she got older. And it is said when she was young, she got into her teens and then into her early 20s and so forth. She was actually diagnosed as a sociopath, and she was put into an institution. And I guess that seemed to help because they let her out. Now, Marjorie had some marriages. Her second marriage was to Roger Sipe Caldwell, and she and Caldwell were bugging Elisabeth here to borrow money constantly. They had dreams of doing a horse ranch and all kinds of other things. And they would get some money, but what she really had her eye out for what was going to be her part of the inheritance. That was Marjorie. And that was about $8 million. So time passes, and all of a sudden, on June 27th, 1977, it is discovered that Elisabeth Congdon and her nurse, Velma, were found murdered. Now, Velma, as you may recall, as we walked through, there was a stairwell, the big staircase going up to the bedrooms. And at the bench there, she was found by the nurse that was relieving her for the next shift. And there was blood. So police were called, and they came, and that's when they discovered Elisabeth. Elisabeth had been suffocated with a satin pillow, and I believe it may have still been stuffed in her mouth. You have to think motive. There were some things stolen from the room, but, not a lot was taken, so everything kind of shifted to Marjorie, and they started putting the pieces together. And one of those pieces they found was a letter that she had, some type of affidavit that she was going to give Roger $2.5 million of her share. And what's interesting is that letter, the date of that letter was 3 days before the murders. So, you know, they kept zeroing in, finding more and more evidence. And there were the coins. There's all kinds of stuff, but we can't really get into too much of the detail. Otherwise, this would be a 2-hour documentary. But the short story is, Roger was arraigned and there was a trial, convicted, and then Marjorie was put on trial, and she had all these antics going and knitting at the defense table and just crazy stuff. She got off. They like the jury was like fogged, so they let her off. And then the Supreme Court came back and let Roger out. Now they were going to retry him. It was kind of like a plea bargain. Say, we want to go through this trial again, so if you plead guilty, we'll just say it's time served and you're good. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'm in, which means I'm out of prison. So that's what happened. They basically got away with murder. Now, years later, Marjorie would not stop. She was convicted of insurance fraud. She burned her house down just after she sold it for the insurance money. She was sent to Perryville prison in Arizona. This was in 1993, not that long ago, guys. And on that very same day, this is really where it gets crazy. Her husband at the time, of course she remarried. Heck, that other guy, you know, Roger's in prison. Why should I stick with him? And I'm not giving him that $2.5 million. She did not. But this guy, this Hagen guy, the day she's going to report to prison, he dies. Like, what's up with that? Whoa, we had a suicide pact. And, you know, I backed out at the last minute. So, it doesn't stop there, guys. They moved to Arizona, and she gets in a fight with the neighbors. You ever see those shows now? The neighbors fighting? People get killed? Well, she's one of those. She was trying to burn their house down. And what she did was, this is really interesting, she had planted a kerosene rag. And the intent is go back and light it up in the middle of the night. Plant the incinerators. So the people found it, and they're like, they call the police and they set a trap. And at 1 in the morning, they're watching, they're staking it out, and all of a sudden they see a flash, and there's someone running very slowly, and it's Marjorie. Back to prison she goes. Back to prison. And it doesn't stop there. This woman was a sociopath for sure. Yeah, very evil. Years later, she's caretaking for, and by the way, that husband dies, so she's a suspect. And now she's working for this guy named Roger Samus. She's his caretaker. Now, would you hire her as your caretaker? Not me. What do you think happened? Well, he died under mysterious circumstances. So what does she do? It was November of 2008. Now, this is, again, not long ago. This is recent, if you will. And she pleaded guilty to fraud because she went to the bank right after he died. And she said, I'm going to get some. And she tried to withdraw, like, all his money right after she died. There's kind of the general story, and what's really creepy, freaky, geeky is that she's still alive. She's living in Arizona somewhere right now. She might be watching this video. Yeah, she's still out there. I wonder if she's getting remarried. So let's focus on Congdons, because here is the family plot right here. Beautiful large Celtic cross with inscriptions on it. It is massive. I'm going to tell you it's about 16 to 18 feet high. Yeah, that is big. And it is beautiful. It's got all sorts of etchings. I see Clara, Chester and Clara. I'll give you a shot of their epitaph and some of the others. So there's Chester Condon. And under that it says Sylvester. I know they lost a child early. Laura, I'm not sure who's who. But here we have Clara Bannister Condon, that's her maiden name, daughter of Edward A. Bannister, the preacher, and on and on. And interestingly, it says, I sing. And that's it. There's a quotation here, I sing, but there's nothing there. So, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. So here are all the Congdons, right here. So there is Chester Condon, CAC, and over here we have Clara Bannister Congdon. And there are Congdons all around us. There's probably 20 or more. But the only place that has flowers, or the only grave that has flowers, is Elisabeth. And we will add to that the rose. Elisabeth Congdon. It was June 27th, 1977. Daughter of Chester Condon and Clara Bannister Congdon. Rest in peace, Elisabeth. Rest in peace.